Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Param Param Ishvaro Guratmeti Murti Veda Vibhagine Yom Avda Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Sava Vedanta Siddhanta Gocharam Tamagocharam Govindam Paramanandam Satguru Pranatoshmaham Om Shanti. So did my screen changed?
Yes, we have the Sanskrit up and you lost tab for
what the heck is going on? Just a moment. Okay. Okay. Okay, so we're gonna let me make sure that there's nobody trying to reach us, no? Can you see well the chart? Okay.
Yes.
We will. So we should go to the text of Swami, the transcriptions of Swami Paramarthananda. We have seen the verse 18 when he begins presenting this concept of dividing Brahman or Satchitananda in four classifications. So he divides it as the Brahman, which is limitless conscious existence. And then he also presents another aspect of Brahman, which appears in the micro, but appears as Brahman, which is in this graph present as Kutashita Atman. Okay, so the Kutashita Atman is the self that cannot be denied, that appears within the human intellect. Okay, so when consciousness appears as the human consciousness, we say that we have Kutachita, which is consciousness, although appearing at the micro, at the micro level. Okay, and then we have consciousness, Satchitananda, at the macro, and consciousness at the micro appearing as well. As what? As Jiva Atma, or the Atma of the Jiva, as sometimes I used to put it. And then we have on the other side, which is on the manifest side, we have Ishwara. Both are reflections. We have Ishwara, which is the totality, or it is consciousness, Satchitananda reflected in the macrocosmic reflecting medium, meaning to say Maya. And then we have also the Jiva on the individual level. On the individual level, we have the Jiva, which is reflected consciousness conditioned as the individual, Tivanpada, literal mean, and Tivanpada, I can't see it. Implied meaning of Tivanpada and literal meaning of Tivanpada. The implied meaning is that, okay, here appears as a Jivatma, but it implies, when the scriptures imply, that Tattvamasi, the implied meaning is that individual consciousness is original consciousness, okay? So when we say Tattvamasi or Aham Brahmasmi, we need to see that what is the implied meaning, because I cannot be that. This cannot be that. The implied meaning is that there is only one Brahman, one consciousness, one Satchitananda. So we refuse the literal meaning that Jiva Atma is Paramatma, and we take the implied meaning. And the implied meaning brings about the concept of Kuta Chita, or something like that, which is the Atma, Brahman, appearing, as the Atma of the Jiva, and it seemingly appears conditioned by the Upadhi. It appears like colored by the Upadhi, but in truth, it's not really conditioned or colored by the attributes of the individual Upadhi. It appears as consciousness, the Atman of the Jiva, okay? Appears in the micro, but fundamentally it is consciousness. Therefore, we have the Mahavakyas that established that Jiva Atma is Paramatma. So, and that brings us to this concept of Kuta Chita. Kutashita. How you say that? How you like to say that? How you choose to say that?
I think it's Kutasta or Kutashta. I'm not sure where the...
Yeah, it sounds better than mine. Kutasta. Yeah, because I haven't heard the audios on this class to pick up the pronunciation. So in this graphic, we have this presentation as I just described. We have a manifestation, and then he presents some analogies, some parallels, so that we can better understand what was already understood by us here. But then to illustrate, he brings these analogies, and he brings the space as a symbol of Brahman. And then it says that there is Maha space, Maha Akasha, on the macro level, and then there is Gata Akasha, which is the pot space. The pot represents the individual space, the space within the pot that we're going to understand, and we know that within this analogy that the outer space and the inner space is one space. Therefore, the outer space, the space outside of the pot, inside of the pot, is the same thing. It's only space, okay? So the pot becomes a upadi. The pot becomes a physical body which holds the Atma of the Jiva as an upadi. So this is what happens with the analogy of total space. The total space and the pot space, the space seen from the angle of the individual pot holding the space, which is equal to the space outside of the pot. So we analyze on the micro, on the micro, and the micro appears to be conditioned by the pot, and the Maha space, which is the limitless space, and then. To the other side of the graph, we have another concept, which is the mega space, okay, and the reflected space. So for the mega space, Swamiji or Vidyaranya brought another analogy that only when we looked into something like that, or when we looked through the expositions, detailed expositions of those verses done by Swami Paramarthananda, and then we can understand. Otherwise, it's a little bit confusing in there. So this concept of the mega space, for that concept, he brings the idea of the cloud, because otherwise, from the pot, the space inside of the pot, outside of the pot, and then you pour water in the pot, and then you have the space above reflect on the surface of water. On that, he could not construct the analogy to explain the concept of mega Akasha. Okay, mega Akasha is present here as the space that is reflected on all clouds. We have the sky, we have clouds, and then on the clouds, there is a space being reflected. We can say so, but how so? Because I can't see the space reflected. So you may be able to, if you go above the clouds, and it comes very close to see those particles of water offering reflections. So we know that there is a reflection because sometimes, furthermore, we see some phenomena appearing as rainbows. That is an indication that there is a reflection on the clouds, on the certain areas of the sky. So he brought these and he presented it as a huge cloud. And then this cloud fundamentally is constituted by infinite numbers of water particles, very, very tiny water particles, which did not become water yet, but it's just there about to become. And then that we can infer that there is a cloud space being reflected, okay? And then we have the reflect condition single that we could, he comes back on his exposure unfoldment of the teacher. He comes back to the pot space and the reflected space, which of course we see the surface of the pot holding water. Once we put water, and then there will be a held water, because without the pot, the water just goes all over the place. It drops and it spreads, and there is no reflection because it's absorbed by the ground, but held in the pot, it's going to present a reflection. So we have a reflected space within the pot, but also he makes some mentions that in that huge cloud with infinite numbers of particles, there are infinite reflections, and those small particles, they represent as well the micro space. You understand? The micro manifest space, okay? So we have all these analogies, but I would like to go back to the teachings, the expositions of Swamiji. How come I lost my page here? Wow, how strange. So give me a moment, please. Page. Maybe it's another document. Oh.
I think verse 18 starts on page 400.
400.
I think.
Yeah, I was looking for page 400 exactly. Okay, I think I'm getting there. Okay, so 400, 401, he says that the fourfold consciousness, is Kutasha, Brahman, Jiva, and Ishvara, as we have determined or understood. And then he used a bunch of other Sanskrit words that we could just overlook them because it makes it more confusing. And then we have two consciousness and two reflected consciousness. The two consciousness is what? Is Paramatma and Paramatma or Paramatma and Jivatma. Paramatma and Jivatma. Paramatma is Brahman, Satchitananda, but then as we see in the graphic, up there is absolute consciousness, and then there is Kutashita. And this is what we want to understand, what he means by this Kutashita, okay? And this is in which way this is the absolute consciousness and this is the micro consciousness, but in the end, micro consciousness is Brahman, the absolute original consciousness, which is the conclusion of every teaching of Vedanta. And then we have two of them are Asatya and two of them are Mithya. Which one? Two of them reflect consciousness. You know that Mithya is a reflection, and in order to have a Mithya phenomenal world, we need medium apparatus, you know, reflecting medium. So we have Ishvara, consciousness in its totality, which is a reflection on the Maya, the reflecting medium. And then we have Jiva, which is the reflection of consciousness in the individual subtle body, which is in analogy presented as what? As the water within the pot. And then the pot itself is the physical body. The water within the pot is going to offer a surface, a reflecting surface, therefore is presented as the subtle body. So we have two reflections. One is Ishvara. In its totality, it's an entire total reflection of the universe, of the cosmos, containing all jivas and all other inert beings, inert objects. Yeah. And then of these four, the text is, Vidyaranya is going to negate Ishvara and Jiva and keep only Brahman and Kushtashta. And then in the end, he's going to resolve Kushtashta in Brahman. Okay, the verse 19. Of this four space, now he moves into the space analogy, which is there in our graphic, okay? He says that he presents original space, okay, which is obtained in the enclosed pot. Original space, which is enclosed the pot, is not defined by Vidyaranya. Okay. So the original space, this is a passage that I had a little doubt in regards to the way he presents it. The four space, the first one, he does not explain. He does not explain the Maha Akasha, which is the total space, okay? So we know here we have space. Space pervades everything. And it appears as enclosed in some containers or some bottles or some jar pot, a pot made of clay pot and so on. So we have the totality of space, which is Maha space, okay? And Vidyaranya does not address this because it is simple to understand that the fundamental element called space is the macro container of this universe and all subtle universe. There is space containing everything. So it is and then he talks about the other one, which is important. Gataskasha. This is Akasha, Gata Akasha, simple, Gatatasha. I should practice my pronunciation before coming to this class. So we have Gatatasha, and that's the one we want to understand now in analogy. Now we are reducing the Jiva-Atma in Gatatasha, Gatakasha. So Gatatasha, Gatakasha is the original space. Once it appears in relationship to an object, you know that space pervades all objects. Once we look at space from the standpoint of an object, and then it appears that the space is limited or enclosed within that object. Are we with it? So it appears that the space is in relationship, or maybe the space now is even a byproduct of the object, or it is limited or enclosed by this object. So when we transfer this parallel to the human consciousness, it appears that the human consciousness is enclosed in the container called the body-mind complex, and it even may appear as if it emanates from the body-mind complex. It appears that consciousness is a byproduct of the mind, or byproduct of the physical instrument, the physical body, physical and subtle body. But we know that is not the case. So we need to understand that this Akasha, the original Akasha, the Maha Akasha, it appears once in reference to certain objects, appears as if they are enclosed in such an object. And then he brings the pot and the space, which is the same Maha Akasha, it's the Maha space, but now it appears in relation to the pot as in or out of the pot. And then we have to first make this analogy, this understand, this analysis of the space in and outside of the pot that several times appear in some other analogies, not with this level of complexity, but just to help us to understand that the same space in and out of a pot relates or refers to the same consciousness in and out of the physical body, or the body-mind complex. No? So the original space, Vidyaranya does not go into that. He does not make further analysis, but it's easy for us to understand. He does not need to bring into this analogy, as it seems. So you imagine within the pot, you hold some water, and then we bring water into this analogy, this metaphor. You look into the water, and then what are you going to see on the surface? You're going to see space, but this space is just a reflection, totally. It's just an appearance, okay? In another reflecting medium, which is the water mirror. You know, water is going to work as a mirror there. No? So water's surface reflects the space. Not only spaces reflect, but also everything above the surface of the water, like clouds, stars, and so on. The reflected space obtained in the pot water is called reflected space. So within the pot, there are two spaces. One is original space, which is the Maha Akasha. Okay, there is only one non-dual space. It's Maha space. So within the pot, there are two spaces. One is Maha space, which similarly appears as what? A pot space. But in further observation or examination, we understand that the space is the same in and out. There is only one space, because the walls of the pot are being permeated by the space. The water even is permeated by space. If you remove the water, the original space enclosed in the pot remains intact, but the reflected space on the surface of the water go away. So when there is water, we see the pot as the physical body and the water as the subtle body. In that, there is reflected space called Jalakasha. Jalakasha, reflected space, okay? While the original space is called Gatakasha. The definition of Gatakasha is assumed and the definition of Galakasha is given in this verse. And then he says that more is coming. And then here he again goes into the sloka 19. The study of Vedanta Shastra reveals that I am a samsari, the original consciousness always. This is new for me. first time I hear here referring to original consciousness as samsari. It almost implying that every reflected consciousness is a samsari. You know, I found it a little funny that.
I think that asam, when you put an a before a word, it negates the word. So it means not a samsari.
Yeah, exactly. So it says that the Vedanta, the teachings of Vedantas want to refer to us that I'm not a samsari, okay? I am a samsari. And it says that a non-samsari or a samsari is original consciousness, always. So, but the funny thing is that I have never heard that word, a samsari, referring to original consciousness or Atma or the self. You understand? Because it almost implies that every reflected consciousness is a samsari, which is not the case.
I also read recently that samsari, if you take it apart, the etymology of that word is continual movement.
Mm.
So if you negate movement, then you're the adhishtanam.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That resolves the problem. And then it means that there are other meanings to the word samsara. And then at samsara is that which does not move, which is original consciousness, akarka. Yeah? Very good. Excellent. So he's not just inventing this expression. It's just the fact that I don't have the knowledge of other meanings of this word samsara. Thank you very much, Lynn. So reveals that I am at samsari, the original consciousness always. The reflect consciousness appears and disappears. Yeah? It comes and the reflect consciousness goes, but I'm not affected. This is the aim of all teachings of Vedanta. This Vidyaranya revealed through the other analogy that we saw recently of the painted canvas example. Then Vidyaranya revealed the same fact through this new analogy using space, Akasha Drishtatam. Drishtatam should be analogy, if you remember.
I think it means from the point of view of Akasha.
Okay. Okay, yeah, through Akasha point of view. Yeah. Our analysis is discrimination of Bimba and Pratibimba Chaitanya. So we have original consciousness and we have Pratibimba, which is the reflected consciousness. The words are many, but the original is one. Here says original, the reflected consciousness. He says that original, this pair called original and reflected consciousness. Either the original and the reflect consciousness is a pair, okay? In this teaching, this analogy, which is very unique from what I understood and very famous within Panchadasi, he brings this pair, which is original consciousness, Brahman, and Kotashista. Huh? So he brings these two. The original and the reflect consciousness pair itself, he takes at two levels. One is at the micro and the other is on the macro. So, and then we see there up there are two levels of the pairs. One is Brahman, absolute consciousness, and then the other is Shuddha Chitta, Shuddha Chitta. And then we have on the macro level, we have on the macro and on the micro, okay? The words are many, he says original content. So one is from the micro and also is from the macro angle. Yeah? One is Tvan Pada Vichara and the other is Tat Pada Vichara. At Paramatma level also there is a differentiation made. Okay, so let's go back to the graphic. So we have here two concepts. One is Brahman and then reflected Brahman. Okay, so absolute consciousness and Atman. So he presents this word Atman. That was the key for me to understand the nuance of this teaching, is that the self, absolute Brahman, is the self, but it's unmanifest, as sometimes it is present. But it appears manifest as the self shining, reflecting in the human intellect. Okay, so we have Brahman, we have original consciousness, manifest, unmanifest, or manifest as the macro, the macro consciousness supporting and pervading the entire manifestation, and then the micro appears as the jiva, but the jiva atma, or the atma of the jiva, the kuta shita. Okay, so let me go back here. So we have the original and we have reflected, and the original and the reflect appears in satya and appears in mithya. In mithya we have also another pair, which is the origin, just a moment, the macro, and then in mithya we have as well the macro, which is Ishvara, which is the manifestation of consciousnness in its totality. And then we have the jiva, which is the manifestation of Brahman, and as the jiva in its substantial nature, as the body-mind complex. Okay, so on the left side we have Kutashita, which is Satya, because it is the Atma of the jiva. On the right side we have jiva in its substantial nature, which is the body-mind complex, which is mithya. So we have Ishvara mithya and we have jiva mithya. And then on the left side, we have Brahman, the absolute Satchitananda, and then we have the Jiva Atma, which is Satya. We have Satya on this side and Mithya on the other side, on the macro and on the micro level. So any help from you, Lynn? I appreciate.
It's great, isn't it? I love to think of myself as a little droplet of water. In the metaphor, it's so pretty.
Okay. And then he says that on the Satya level, on the Paramatma level, on the left side of our graphic here, Vidyaranya makes a very subtle differentiation. In the end, he will resolve the micro, Shuta Shita, in Brahman, as we know. At the end, he will conclude that both reflect consciousness, and he will negate and he will resolve or merge into original consciousness and say that there is no difference between the two. Okay, so in the beginning I would say, oh my God, why to present a concept just to destroy the concept? But more I looked into this teaching, this graphic, you start appreciating, understanding, and appreciating and understand the reason why this nuance and why to present. It's different. It's more structured, construct way to realize that the Jiva Atma is Paramatma, and Jiva Atma is Satya, as long as we refer to the Atma aspect of Jiva, you understand? And which is non-dual, it's one Atma. And then he shows here Brahmana consciousness, which is conscious and existence. He presents it as the Atma, the self that is and knows that it is, the I, the self. It's very beautiful to see this nuance because it helps us to understand that the final resolution, Jivatma is Paramatma, is supported in so many ways, through several different angles of our teachings. So if we say that Jivatma is Paramatma, and then what it means that Jivatma must be standing in Satya. You understand? Because Paramartha is Satya. If I say Jivatma is Paramartha, Jivatma is Paramatma, and then Jivatma must be standing in Satya as well. And here we understand that, because Jivatma is the self, which is one without a second. Okay, although it appears in association with the body-mind complex, which is Mithya, but the Atma of the Jiva is Satya. Otherwise, we never make any sense. I mean, how can we equate, Jiva Atma with Paramartha, Jiva Atma, Paramatma. Paramatma level also, at Paramatma level also, there is a difference made. At the end, we conclude that it's all one Atma. Therefore, what will be left is original limitless consciousness, and it's present either in the micro and in the macro, in the micro and the micro. I make a confusion because in Portuguese, we say micro for the micro, So I mean to say, so we have original consciousness, and there is only one, but it appears in the micro and appears at the macro level as well. This is the grand design of Vidyaranyana's teaching, and it carries on in the following lines. Vidyaranyana calls micro original consciousness as Kutashta, and micro reflected consciousness as the Jiva. So the reflection of consciousness which occurs in the subtle body, he calls the Kutashta, and which is the micro original consciousness. Okay, it is original consciousness. Oh, but it's reflected consciousness. How can reflect consciousness be original consciousness? Okay, because reflected consciousness is a mixture of the original consciousness plus reflected consciousness, and there are some beautiful teachings of Vedanta we will find in this Panchadasi that demonstrates it very beautifully. Okay, so he calls the micro original consciousness. When we talk about micro original consciousness, no, original consciousness is only macro. No, on the micro level as well, because it's the same limitless consciousness, and that's called Kutashta. And he calls all the micro reflect consciousness the Jiva, and the macro original consciousness is called Brahman, and the macro reflect consciousness is called Ishvara. Okay, so we have here Brahman appearing in its absolute nature as limitless conscious existence, and then the same Brahman appears in its limitless conscious existence nature as the Atma of the Jiva, as reflected consciousness, the micro original consciousness. He called micro original consciousness. He does not call reflect consciousness. And micro reflect consciousness is called Jiva. On the other side, the micro reflect. So it's almost as if he's trying to say, like it appears in some other teachings of the Panchadasi, that the original consciousness is contained in the reflect consciousness in both ways. Okay, and in this teaching, Vidyaranyana presents. It's I don't know which chapter it's going to appear, Vidyaranya presents the analogy of a projector projecting light, né? And this light is being projected on a huge wall, né? But there is a mirror in between, and this light is being projected on the wall, but there is a secondary projection because this light also hits the mirror and further projects on the wall. And then on that wall, what we have? We have original light being projected, and then we have another light, which is the reflection that occurs in the mirror. That is going to make a spot on the wall that is a little bit more shiny. You understand? You remember this analogy, Lynn?
I don't remember it, but you explained it beautifully. I get it.
And then what are we going to make of it? We have the wall, and then the wall there is reflected light. And there is a brighter part because it's the original light and the reflect light. So now, how are we going to sort it out and say, okay, so is this spot, which is brighter, what is original light and what is reflected light, okay? So it is both, it is mixed, you understand? And likewise, consciousness, which is spreads and pervades everything, it somehow shines in this reflecting medium and produce this human consciousness. And this human consciousness is a mixture that is nicely present in these other teachings of Vidyaranya that we're going to reach, we're going to get to in the future. It's a mixture of both, okay? So, and then we have on the right side of the chart, we have Ishvara as consciousness manifests as pure knowledge, pure intelligence, and also manifests as the entire cosmos. No? And then we have the Jiva manifest in its substantial nature as matter energy, or in other words, the body-mind construct. Of these four, Jiva and Ishvara will ultimately be dismissed, and Kutashta and Brahman will be left out. So, as we know, we always do our work of discrimination to somehow dismiss or reject reality to Ishvara and Jiva in their substantial nature, okay? We know that fundamentally Ishvara is Brahman, understand? And we know that the Jiva fundamentally, although appearing in its substantial nature, the body-mind phenomenon, fundamentally we know that it's also Brahman, okay? So, but we are here to discriminate what is the appearance, although the appearance is resolved into its reality as Satchitananda, as the original, okay? But this appearance, being a superimposition, needs to be understood and negated. Otherwise, we're going to superimpose the appearance, of these namarupas and these phenomenal objects on Brahman, which is our true fundamental free nature. So we need to discriminate Jiva and Ishvara from Brahman, although we know that Ishvara and Jiva are Brahman, but we need to separate, isolate them so that we can see Brahman in its clear, free, naked nature as Satchitananda. Understand? So that's what we are doing here. We are dismissing the Jiva and Ishvara, and we're going to hold Kutashta and Brahman as the only reality. So these two also will be understood as divisionless. And later on, we're going to say that there is no difference between the pot, the space outside of the pot, and the space inside of the pot. There is no difference between Brahman and Kutashta. There's no division. The difference is in name but fundamental, there is only one Brahman, one consciousness. They are called in this teaching Kutastha, Brahman, Ishvara, and to simplify this study, Vidyaranya presents the analogy of space, Akasha. Producing or introducing the idea of the micro original space, the space in relation to the pot, the micro reflected space, which is the space in relate to the spot with water, the space reflect on the surface of the water. So now we are looking at space in analogy, making a parallel, and we are bringing the original space. And within the original space, we're going to understand that appears to be in and out of the pot. And within the pot, once we add water to the pot, we have the micro reflected space, okay? So we have the macro original space and the macro reflected space. So we have the macro space, which appears enclosed in the pot, and then we call that the micro space, and then we have the space of the micro space producing a reflect, and the macro space producing as well a reflected space. And he's going to use the clouds to explain better the macro reflection of space, which appears to illustrate this teaching. So here also Vidyaranya gives 4 names for the space. It is for simplifying the teaching. He gives the 4 names as long as you know Sanskrit and you memorize those Sanskrit names. Micro original space, the micro original space, the space in and out of the pot is called Gataksha, Akasha, Gatakasha. Okay, Gatakasha. And then macro level space, Jalakasha, and the macro original space, Mahakasha. So he is using these 3 levels. He has just a macro reflect space, Mega Akasha. So he has a Mega Akasha as well. He does not elaborate in terms of analogy for explain the Mahakasha, but he brings the analogy to explain Mega Akasha, and then he presents more analogies to explain the Jalakasha and the Gatakasha. So if you would equate space and consciousness, Akasha and Chaitanya, and then we would have these 3 different space, okay, or 3 different consciousness, or 4, is Gatakasha, Kutastha, Chaitanya, Jalakasha is equated to Jiva. Mahakasha will be equated to Brahman, as we can see in the chart, and Megakasha is going to be equated to Ishvara. If you understand this, the 6th chapter is over. But since we are never satisfied of Swamiji's exposure, although we have understood, we're going to carry on. Here, in the 9th verse, Vidyaranya has introduced 2 Akashas. 2 Akashas over there. At the micro level, that is original space enclosed in the pot, which exists whether the spot is there or the pot is not there, bingo. So he is presenting the concept of original space in the micro. You understand? Why? Because original space is there whether the pot is present or whether there is no pot, okay? It's like the Kutastha, which is consciousness, which is present, okay, in the absence of the Jivatma, or in the presence of the Jivatma. In the presence of Jivatma, it's going to appear as the Atma, the self, human consciousness, which in truth is Maha consciousness or Brahman. Okay. The pot is there, the space appears to be enclosed, but the space is in and out of the pot. It is this original space. It's on the micro level is there regardless of the pot or no pot. Imagine that we pour water in the pot, then you see the space reflected the surface of the pot water. So it is upper space because it reflects the space above. The space reflecting the pot may have other things like clouds or a bird that's flying or anything. So it's the pot is in the upper space is reflect. The space reflect may contain stars and clouds and the sun. So from that, it's clear that it is the reflection of the upper sky, the upper space. When the pot is broken and the water gets scattered, the reflected space will disappear, and Gatakasha and Gatakasha will continue. Okay, so the space is going to. The reflect space is going to disappear, and the original space in or out of the pot will remain. The disappearance of the reflect water is not due to the fact that the pot was broken. It was just because here presented as broken, but if we just turn the pot and then the water goes, and then we have still the space, original space in and out, but no longer reflect the space. But if you break it, and then you lose the concept or the notion of original space in and out of the pot, enclosed or not enclosed by another object. The upper sky, the upper space is reflect, and it is called Jalakasha. Here we have to supply Katakasha, which is enclosed in the pot. Okay, just one more verse. Always look into the chart, into the graph. Mahakasha. Now Vidyaranya wants to explain macro space. So space on the macro level. And macro reflected space as well, for which we need a huge reflecting medium. Here, he used a different analogy. He brings in a huge rain-bearing clouds forming in the rainy season. This becomes the reflecting medium. He introduced the macro Mahakasha. So the macro Mahakasha is the totality, the huge. Introduce the macro Mahakasha. Just a moment. Mahakasha, macro, okay. He introduced the macro Mahakasha, the total original space, and the rain-bearing cloud in the form of reflecting medium. So the totality, the Mahakasha, the Maha space includes the space reflect on those the infinite numbers of particles of water, in the clouds. Forming. So you have the reflect and you have the totality of all space holding that huge rain-bearing cloud, okay, which is formed in the rainy season. He introduced the macro Mahakasha, the total original space, and the rain-bearing cloud in the form of reflecting medium. Mahakasha is the total space, okay? Total space as the graphic presents. And in the middle of the Mahakasha, there is a huge cloud, a huge patch of rain-bearing clouds, which will stretch for kilometers or miles. So we get a vast, huge medium. This cloud is seen by us. In those cloud waters, there is Akasha. So Akasha is there. It's pervading and holding this cloud. So now we have the Akasha, and then we have this huge medium, this vast medium, miles long, wide. And then there is Akasha, which is in the form of the reflection of Akasha at the macro level. Akasha is seen in the form of macro reflected space. So now we have presented 4 Akashas. This has been introduced. Of the 4 Akashas, 3 are perceptible. So he says that in this Akasha, of the 4 Akashas, 3 are perceptible. So the Gatakasha, Jalakasha, and Megakasha. Mahakasha we experience and recognize. 3 Akashas are directly experienced. Now, how do you know that there is reflect Akasha in the clouds? Okay, so we have the concept of Mahakasha, and 3 Akashas are direct experienced. Okay, we have the in the left side here, below Mahakasha, we have the Gatakasha, which is for the pot space reflecting the space above. We could also use the analogy of the huge cloud, and then small particles of water reflecting the space as well. Okay, so we have the Akasha for space reflecting, but we can also see from the standpoint of the Megakasha cloud space. So we have 3 spaces. We have the same space appearing as the nature of Mahakasha in any circumstance. And then we have a Megakasha, the cloud space, which again is fundamentally held by Mahakasha, but it is there. And then reflecting on this cloud space, we have another reflection, which is the Jiva, which is the Jala Akasha, which are the water space reflecting Akasha from which is above. And then the point here is that he says that we have Brahmana, we have means, and by Brahmana here it's a means of knowledge, but it's referring more to perception. So using our senses, sense perception is going to allow us, it's going to provide us with a Brahmana to understand 3 of these Akashas, but not to understand the Mega Akasha. Okay, so we understand Mahakasha because conceptually we understand that there is such a thing as space as the container of the entire cosmos, the entire universe. Okay, and then we understand on the micro the Gatakasha, and then on the right side we have the Jalakasha. But the Mega Kasha, we say that there is space being reflected in that notion of Mega Kasha that cannot be perceived by the sense. Perception cannot see that. And then he says here that we do not have Brahmana to know, to experience, to know by perception, Mega Kasha. And then he says, Akasha. Pratyakasha is the Pramana for the first 2, and there is no Pramana for Mega Kasha. Okay, so I get really confused with all this pronunciation. But anyhow, anyhow, the point to be made here is that we understand Mahakasha intellectually, and we have a Brahmana that easily allows us to understand that space is all over the place. And then we have the notion of the space reflected on the water, or the space reflect on the small drops of water in the clouds. And then we have the concept of the space reflect in these droplets of water, which somehow are seen as individual akashas, okay? So by individual akashas is just a mere appearance, okay? It's not the truth. And there is only one akasha. And then we have the mega akasha, which is the entire cloud that holds these droplets of water that is going to produce this reflection of the totality, which would be the macro, the Ishwara, the totality of all reflections, you know. So we cannot really, through perception, understanding, or get to know Mega Kasha, but we're going to see in the next class that by inference, we are going to have a pramana to Mega Kasha, and inference is a super valid means of knowledge. In fact, even the Maha Kasha, in fact, even Akasha has to be understood, not really inference. It's just a subtle object that cannot be negated, because without space, there is no phenomenon that we could experience. Okay, so we carry on next week from this sloka 21. Okay, 21. I'm going to record this class, make it available for Claude and Mark, and we meet again next Monday, okay? And you see, I was saying like, oh, maybe we're gonna shift into the expositions of Swami Paramarthananda, but somehow I was forced to do it now. And when we get into his expositions, and then my exposition becomes much richer, because he is an expert. He passed his entire life studying scriptures. So I don't know, maybe we're going to jump into it. And then only Shwara knows when we're going to end this Panchadasi. Anything else, Lynn?
No, but thank you so much for today's class. I have a lot more clarity on this, the metaphor and its application.
Yeah, wonderful. And thank you for helping, thank you for finding this graphic. It helped me a lot to understand better this teachings. Sylvia, is she still with us?
Yeah.
Okay.
Here. Thank you.
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you. Thank you. Namaste. We meet again next week.
Thanks, Arlindo.
Thank you. Bye-bye.